It's good to forget. No, I don't just mean trauma, I mean in general. I see you don't believe me. Well, okay. Allow me to illuminate. Imagine for a second we remembered everything in perfect detail. That all of our dim memories were suddenly as real and vivid and believable as the perceptions that we make in the present, like we had a perfect memory. If this were the case, then the past and the present would cease to be interpreted as different. They would each be virtually occurring at the same time. Our sight would be so clear, we would be blind, unable to discern the difference. Except perhaps if we look towards the future, that great chasm, the mist through which no one can see. Only then would we have a sense of time and perspective. For if we could predict the future, then we could safely assume that the future has already happened. In other words, that the future is actually the past, and that we're living in it. But if ever the future became blurry as it is now, then we could at least know that we are living closer to the present. All this to say that life without forgetting would be very, very, very confusing. But thankfully, this isn't a human struggle. Indeed, our struggle is just the opposite. We forget in abundance. Too much, some might say. It's almost as if it's built into our nature, which I guess would make it natural. And if it's natural, then wouldn't this mean that forgetting serves some purpose, as virtually all things in nature do? But is this function good? How could forgetting my lunch benefit me or us? Well, I can't testify to your lunch, but forgetting does serve a purpose, and it's really quite simple to explain with something like, say, autistic fruit flies. Well, no, not quite that simple. Exactly how one goes about making the segue from forgetting to autistic fruit flies is beyond me. But hear me out. Turns out that you and fruit flies have a lot in common. I'm sure you're able to tell that when you looked in the mirror this morning. Fruit flies share roughly 60% of our genes and nearly 75% of the genes that cause disease in humans. I personally would like to squish them, but scientists love these little guys. Their entire genome has been sequenced and extensively studied. They're easy to keep. Duh. And their marbles drop in about 2 weeks, so they're not terribly anxious about reproducing. Imagine returning from a 2-week vacation to find that your babysitter was dead and your little baby was now a full-grown man, married with a mere 400 kids. Fruit flies live a bit on the wild side. Anyway, a number of these little cuties were genetically modified in 2016 to contain a protein common in those with autism, among which was a protein linked to diminishing forgetting. And as a result, fruit flies can now read our minds. No, never fear, this is only a minor side effect. The true effect was that signs of autism emerged. The fruit flies struggled to adapt to changes in their environment and became a tad shy. Or dead. I don't know. It's hard to tell with this one. Mice were likewise modified and showed similar results, taking the same path in a maze over and over again, and showing reduced interaction with other mice. So what? Some scientists gave fruit flies and mice autism. Hail science. No. As interesting as it is that we've learned a new way to avenge our gobbled cheese and damaged fruit, this is not the focus of the study. Rather, it's that reduced forgetting or over-remembering causes behavioral changes which, in the extreme, can produce detrimental outcomes. Our splendid world is changing. Celebrities are going to the moon, Vice filed for bankruptcy, electric salt shakers now exist. Virtually every human being who has or ever will exist strives to reduce the amount of change in their lives to a reasonable level, even if that means changing their routines to reduce that change. Irony. But no matter how successful they are in this endeavor, some change always occurs. Just look at these poor British soldiers trying to stop us from creating the greatest country on earth. And here we are. Change isn't always a bad thing. I mean, look how much you change. Oh goodness. It's okay. You can still recognize yourself even on these off days, I hope. I mean, imagine if you couldn't.
Hello, you reached 911. What's your emergency?
Yes, please, I saw somebody in my house. Oh dear, yeah,
Okay,
there she is again.
Could you please
it's
calm
some
down?
kind of intruder.
Please calm
come
down,
quick.
lady.
I think she's
I need
mocking
you to
me.
tell me what she looks like.
She's She's eating my cookies now.
What?
Stop it now. Put that down.
What does she look like?
Well, a bit like me.
But how is all this possible? It's something we never think about. How many thousands of faces you can make.
You're full of shit, Jacob.
How many hats you can wear. How many different ways light lands on you. And you can still recognize your old mug in spite of all these changes to your appearance. Not only your own face, but others as well. Approximately 5,000 to be exact. Well, how we can remember all this could be its own video. But at the heart of the different processing mechanisms is our brain's remarkable ability to omit the unnecessary. Essentially forgetting the subtle or, in your case, not so subtle changes. This ability is even mimicked in facial recognition software. For a while, we thought that adding more memory or larger data sets would make such software more accurate and faster. But it turns out this isn't exactly true. We have Dropout to thank for that. And if you don't know, Dropout is computer speak for forgetting. In other words, even facial recognition software relies on forgetting to remember faces. And so, the brain's ability to adapt by forgetting the unnecessary or irrelevant information prevents us from rubbing too hard against the goads of time and getting a boo-boo. But it also helps us to become more efficient. Before 1983, it was commonly thought that sleep aided memory through dream rehearsal. However, this perspective began to shift when researchers made an astounding discovery that sleep deprivation actually increases neuron sensitivity to sensory input. Well, okay, let's break that down. Imagine your brain is like a room filled with all sorts of objects and memories. Each item represents a piece of information, and some of them are really important while others are just clutter. Inside your brain, you have these amazing cells called neurons. They're like tiny workers who handle all the information in the room. When you had a good night's sleep, these neurons are well rested too, and they respond to information in a balanced and organized way, just like a professional cleaner discarding the mountains of useless memorabilia lying about your floor to make space for the important items. But what happens when you don't get enough sleep? Well, it's as if your neurons turn into hoarders, and they become super sensitive to sensory stimuli, like your crazy uncle who is fascinated in the most mundane items, collecting, and refusing to throw anything away. And this is what researchers Francis Crick and Graham Mitchison proposed in their 1983 article. The primary cognitive function of sleep was not memory improvement. No, at least not directly. Instead, the primary function was, well, take a guess, why don't you? Forgetting. But this theory wasn't confirmed until 2017 when powerful microscopes were used to determine the size of dendritic spines across large areas of the brain's cortex. The findings revealed that during sleep, a significant number of dendritic spines shrink, and as they shrink, weak, redundant, and unnecessary neural connections are severed to make space for new memories. Hey, remember that piece of grass in your yard? You know, the one that's next to the light brown one? Of course you don't. We don't need to retain such useless details, and our brains know this even while we sleep. So during that period, it prioritizes what is truly important to remember, ensuring we wake to find ourselves focused on the essential tasks and valuable knowledge. Things like art, for example. You see, creativity benefits from the forgetting that occurs during sleep. And it makes sense because artists are like specialists in condensing complex knowledge into edible, bite-sized brain snacks. Kind of like what sleep does with all the information in your brain. As Picasso said, art is the elimination of the unnecessary. A painting is surrounded by a frame, and this frame serves to condense this information into a canvas. A piano composition doesn't use every single note combination possible, unless perhaps it's composed by your 2-year-old. Instead, it's arranged in a meaningful way to convey a message that may be remembered long after the composer has gone. But our minds aren't always so organized, and at times we find ourselves remembering more than we ought, especially when it comes to fear and sorrow. Imagine your brain is like a garden with different patches of soil. The traumatic memories are like stubborn weeds that have taken root in one patch, which we called the amygdala garden. These weeds are triggered by certain cues like seeing a specific object or a face, for example. Just like how weeds can sprout when they get sunlight and water, much like other plants. You see, the amygdala is there for a reason. It serves a purpose to keep us alive, but the more fear memories we acquire, the more active this amygdala becomes. Or keeping to the analogy, the more these weeds dominate this territory, turning once fertile soil into an absolute wasteland. So we can try to pluck these bad memories out one by one, but for now we're limited in our ability to physically do this, so we must find a new strategy. The treatment that's most common with patients experiencing PTSD is called exposure therapy. The agricultural equivalent would be the clover cover crop, which grows quickly and forms dense ground cover that effectively suffocates out the weeds and enriches the soil with nitrogen. In other words, the goal of therapists in this endeavor would be to expose the patient with similar scenarios as the original traumatic event, but without the dreadful occurrences attached. Through this process, they encourage the amygdala to return to a healthy balance of remembering and forgetting. You see, forgetting isn't just important for efficiency, it's essential for our emotional well-being, our ability to progress, to move on, to establish a better, brighter future for ourselves and for others. Life would be pretty grim without it. In fact, it is questionable if ethics would even exist without forgetting. Forgiveness requires a certain forgetting of past wrongs. Compassion requires a certain forgetting of oneself, and so on. More than this, our individual ethical principles take shape based on prior experiences, which are refined into practical guidelines by discarding or forgetting less effective approaches. On the other end of the spectrum, extreme obsessive remembrance leaves us vulnerable to ethical catastrophes. Take, for example, Nazi Germany's obsession with racial purity and their inability to adapt to cultural diversity. Virtually all atrocities that have ever occurred in human history can be at least partially explained by this inability to adapt or forget in a world of constant flux. Without forgetting, we would inevitably seek darkness. Overwhelmed by information, we would cower in the shadows in which nothing new can be learned, if such a place can be found. But thanks to our brain's mechanism of forgetting, we can live happier, healthier, and more ethical lives. Research for this production was made so much easier thanks to Dr. Scott A. Small's book, Forgetting: The Benefits of Not Remembering. If you wish to learn more about forgetting and the mysteries of our wondrous mind, I highly recommend you check it out. It's a short book, but packed full of information that might surprise you. Additionally, my goal for this channel is to work full-time, and that will speed up the production of these videos. So if you like what you see, I have a Patreon link down below, and of course there's a subscribe button. So go ahead and hit that, hit the notification bell, you know the drill.